Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Albion Obsessed podcast. We're feeling quite poetic at the moment. Last week, we chatted to the Brighton Bard, and this week we have another fantastic guest with us today. But we're also joined by Kurtis. Kurtis, my friend, how are you?
Splendid, my friend. Absolutely amazing. Good. Very good today.
Fantastic. That's what we like to hear. Toby, we welcome you back. How are you, mate?
Yes, yeah, doing amazingly. Still haven't quite gotten over the win 4-0 against United, so absolutely buzzing still.
Yeah, it still puts a smile on my face when you mention that scoreline. What a day it was. And I'm sure we'll ask our special guest about that in a little while. So we also welcome John Bain, aka Attila The Stockbroker. How are you, John? How are you, my friend?
I'm all right. I'm good. Yeah. Bit knackered. I've just got so much to do at the moment. COVID, the whole sort of 2 years of no gigs. When I was supposed to be doing my 40th anniversary tour, was a real piss off, frankly. But now I'm absolutely back on the road again, and I'm happy to say that everybody who wanted to put me on then is wanting to put me on now and then some. So I've just got an enormous amount of stuff to do. And of course, it's coming up not long now to the festival that I run or co-run, Glastonbury, in a couple of weeks' time at Coombs Farm in Lancing. And of course, we've just had the elections where you may or may not know that my wife became the first Labour councillor for Southwick Green ever last year. Well, this time we got her friend Jude in for the other seat. So, and obviously Worthing has been completely taken over now, and Ada are well on the way to kicking the fossilised Tories into the dustbin of history, which is precisely where they belong. And I make no apologies if that offends anybody on this programme who is a Tory, because, well, basically, the funny thing is that during the election campaign, this will make you laugh. A week ago today, I was playing football at Plough Lane. Now, you know, you're obviously a lot younger than me, so it might take a bit of explaining. But I have, for 40 years, on and off, I've released my records and published my books via Cherry Red Records, who are the main sponsors of AFC Wimbledon. And I know the CEO very well and have done since 1981. To cut a long story short, you may also know that AFC Wimbledon finally got their new stadium up and running earlier on this year, the new Plough Lane, and sadly got relegated. But at the end of this season, they wanted to celebrate by having the first inaugural Cherry Red Records football match there. So they invited not just everybody who works for the company, which is many people now, probably 100 people, but also people who record for the label. And because it's a kind of, in most ways, what you might describe as a sort of heritage label, it tends to be people of my generation and not that much younger who are mainly featured on there. And for various reasons, nobody apart from me actually wanted to play. The idea was there was going to be 2 matches, 60 minutes for people, you know, who are young and play football regularly, and 20 minutes for people like me. But I ended up, and to cut long story short, I ended up playing 45 minutes against people your age, charging around like a blue-ass fly. I cycled loads. I'm useless at football, charged around like a blue-ass fly. And great fun. Then came back home to a relieved wife, and then in the middle of the night woke up with both my Achilles tendons on fire, which meant that on election day I had to do the telling. And all the Tories opposite me were all Albion fans who were all, you know, who were all aware of my role in the campaign to save the club, and it gave us something to talk to, thus keeping the conversation civil and avoiding any sort of minor ruptuses, which would got me into trouble with my other half, because I can be quite volatile. So I'm sorry that went on a bit, but you know, it was fun playing at AFC Wimbledon. It was fun playing on a pitch that, you know, was level and everything, you know, because I'm no good, but I used to play, and I still enjoy occasionally having a kick around, although I was completely out of my depth because many of them were sort of Isthmian League standard, so it was pretty ridiculous, really, but it was fun.
Good, and that's all you can ask for. But I'm here for that content. That was brilliant, and a big congratulations to your wife as well, because you know, a lot of hard work has gone into that campaign, and I'm all for the kicking of the team in blue.
I was literally about to say I'm fully on board with kicking the Tories out. I'll drink to that.
And not wasn't just that, of course. I mean, it's not just the campaign. I mean, she's been doing incredible amounts of very hard work for the last year in an area which has been a fiefdom of theirs for many years. So, and the level of neglect and just complete lack of consideration, or lack of basically undertaking of the tasks which you should undertake if you're a councillor. You know, she's having to right so many wrongs, but at least now she's got a partner who is on the same side, rather than someone who will obstruct her, as her predecessor most certainly tried to do.
Well, let's hope the future is certainly brighter for.
Well, it will.
Yeah,
it will be.
definitely.
Oh yeah,
fantastic. So, John, Attila, I like to start these sort of guest appearances with just asking 3 questions, if I may. They're quite generic questions, but I just I feel like they're ones I'm really interested in. So the first of which is, can you remember your first Brighton and Hove Albion game live and in the flesh?
Well, the answer to that is sort of. I started going in when I was about 6, so about 1963. I don't remember the very first one. I mean, what I do remember, you know, my poem Goldston Ghost, which is in Dick's Bar, it basically sums it up, really. The first time that I have a conscious memory of something that happened at the football was my dad pointing at somebody and saying, "That's Bobby Smith, John. He was playing for Spurs a couple of years ago when they won the double." And me understanding what he was saying, but at that time it was just a big fantastic blurb. I absolutely loved it, but I didn't realise the full import of this fact. And that was the 1964 season where, thanks to Bobby Smith, we won the 4th division. He played for Brighton. Apparently, everyone wondered why. Many years later, I'm not certain that this is true, but the rumor goes that the reason he did so was because he had a gambling problem, and he had a bookie in Brighton, and the bookie said that he'd write off his gambling debts if he came to play for the Albion. So, I mean, I'm not certain that that's the case, but it's what I've heard. Anyway, so yes, I would say 64. The first time I really remember something absolutely was the first mention in Goldston Ghosts, which was when I was 8 and we played Chelsea I think it was 1966 in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, and drew 2-2. And we were in the South Stand, and they were throwing the old, long before your time, the large pennies at us, which, when sharpened, could actually be quite nasty. But that's my first concrete memory of watching the Albion.
Wow, that's fantastic, and that's a bit of a nice bit of a history lesson there as well. Another question I always ask people, and it's a bit tricky. Well, I found it tricky when they asked me. Was have you ever had like a favourite Brighton player, someone who just speaks to you on a footballing level or a humanitarian level? Is there any players over our history that you just think, yeah, they're good people?
Well, the one who I would have said that about most definitely was Craig McHale-Smith, who I met when he first signed for the club. Because, I mean, you may know that I was stadium announcer and everything with Dean and Gillingham, and I just stopped doing that. Well, I was retired really when we got the new stadium. But I was doing something up there, and I bumped into Craig McHale-Smith, and just after he'd signed, and I was talking to him, and I mean, I'd always known his history, where he'd come from, and I'd always really admired the level of commitment that he showed. And I was just saying to him, what I always say if I talk to a footballer, and I've talked to a few, I always say, you know, we have something in common. We both earn our living doing something we absolutely love. And it's an incredible privilege, because most people don't have that opportunity. And whether I'm playing to 10 people or 1,000, and I have played to both, I give my all the whole time I'm on stage. And the one thing I can't stand is when I'm watching footballers who are paid to play football and they're not trying and they're not fully committed. That's one thing, however crap you are, if you give 100%, that is the very least you can do. And of course, there have been many, not just for the Albion, but for in general, who haven't done that. And I really hate that. And McHale-Smith was he made a huge impression on me, which sadly he completely, more or less, evaporated by becoming a COVID denier. And sadly, what he's been posting online about that has been, in terms of on the pitch, well, I mean, I'm going to go way off the obvious ones now, and I'm going to plump for Darren Curry, who played for us at Withdean, who was incredibly skilled. His ability to construct a pass, or do a free kick was just. I mean, I'm not quite sure. You probably saw him play. I mean, I just absolutely loved that absolute intelligence. He was really slow. He couldn't tackle, but he could just do that, and I absolutely loved it. And I mean, it was just one of those. I really like players like that. We've had a few over the years. Dean Wilkins was another one. You know, I mean, obviously in this team, actually, obviously we've got Pascal Gross, who's another example of the same thing. Not much pace, not, you know, but what he does is he can really pass, and he's, you know, they create opportunities there. They're the people that, you know, who provide the assists. But Darren Curry, one of the worst, you know, during the worst of times. And the other thing was that Darren Curry came on the marches and everything. And during the worst of times, you know, he was one player that stuck out for me. Who, you know, I wouldn't want to be boring and mention the obvious ones, like obviously Bobby Zamora or whatever. You know, another one further back who you won't have seen was Gary Nelson, who was not only really good around 1991. He's a very clever guy. Is a very clever guy, and wrote 2 books: Best Foot Forward, Left Foot Forward, and Left Foot in the Grave, about being basically a lower division footballer and all the different things that are involved, you know, off the pitch. And yeah, he was sort of between about 87 and 91. He scored loads of goals for us, and he's another player that wouldn't be considered obvious, who I would definitely also put in the same category.
Yes,
we've had the privilege to have Craig McHale-Smith on this show, and I also want to just add to what you've said, that he was the nicest of guys. Had so much time for us. I think at the time we had some sort of tech issue or internet issue as well, and he just gave us so much time, and he was so lovely to us. And during my era as a Brighton fan, he's the absolute shining light of players that give determination and give their all. So I couldn't agree more with you, John, that players that just give their absolute all for the club, play for the badge, play with their heart on their sleeves, they're always the best ones. So I couldn't agree with you more with your selections.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about McHale-Smith was that he was so impressive, both as a bloke talking about, because, you know, I said to him, you know, we have this privilege, we both earn our living doing what we love, and I knew that he'd started off, you know, in the Ryman League, playing for St Albans City and everything, and then gone to Dagenham, Redbridge and Peterborough, and on every level he was really impressive. And I was really sad when I saw this stuff he was putting up about COVID. I mean, it just didn't fit in with someone with that level of compassion and general sort of, you know, and general sort of decency. And I was really shocked and sad, but yeah, and it really disappointed me. So I'm basically, apart from that, I think he's great, and hopefully somebody will convince him that he's talking a load of bollocks about that, because that really does wind me up, because for various reasons, not only because I've got COPD thanks to 20 years of doing gigs before the smoking ban and inhaling other people's smoke. Although, you know, I cycle about 80 miles a week, so it's not like a really bad thing. But you know, it's something that I really had to worry about when there was no vaccines and everything. And when there were vaccines, I was champing at the bit to get one. You know. Anyway.
Yeah, definitely. And it's like you appreciate, so as you say, someone who tries. And I always thought that way about Chris O'Grady. You know, someone who was absolutely not to the standard of our championship squad, however, always gave his all, which was more than you could say about some of the other dross that we've had throughout the years. And maybe Toby and Kurtis, you might not remember the Withdean years, but yeah, we had some interesting players.
Well, if you want the other extreme, of course, is Paddy McCourt, one of the most talented players I've ever seen on a football pitch. If you combine the determination and absolute dedication of Craig McHale-Smith and the skill of Paddy McCourt, you'd have a world beater. I mean, the things that he could do were brilliant, but he only did them about, when he felt like it, about once every 3 weeks. And it was really sad.
Yeah, I remember. Was it the Derry Pele they called it?
Yeah, the Derry Pele, that's right.
Yeah.
Derry Pele. No, that's right. Yeah.
It's Wait, but talking of which, I know we're going on a bit of a tangent here, but if you want to look at potentially wasted opportunity, look at no further than Aaron Connolly. he's a skillful player, no doubt about it. There's got to be a skillful player in there somewhere.
But unfortunately, it feels like he plays for himself. So
another one was Leon Knight, of course. I'm sure you remember him. He had incredibly skillful player, but well, basically an awful attitude to the game.
Yeah, definitely. Couldn't agree with that more. One last question for the generic three, John, and then we can chat about other things. I like a good football shirt, mate. I'm a bit of a collector of Brighton shirts. I'm always keen to get my hands on new and or old shirts.
You've got my second favourite Brighton shirt right behind you there, the Nobbo shirt. But I prefer the pink Nobbo one.
I've got that as well.
Nobbo shirt is my favourite ever Brighton shirt because at that time, you know, I mean, obviously there was homophobia, and it was extremely funny, and it was obviously. But what I loved about it most was the responses that we gave. I mean, obviously homophobia in football is totally unacceptable. However, but the only redeeming feature was the way that we could absolutely wind everybody up by turning this expectation of being insulted into you know, turning it on its head and informing them that he was over there or behind them, or you know, all the other things that we used to sing. Lead the way, being the very best ones. You know, we're gay and we've beaten you, and you know, all the rest of it. You know, but it's really good that has stopped, and you know, all that nonsense is just, you know, I mean, that's fantastic. And well done to everybody who's campaigned against it. And well done to Whitehall. The other thing you may know about me is that when the Albion aren't playing, I am an occasional Whitehall ultra, and I love the attitude there as well. They're brilliant.
Yeah, it's fantastic. I've got the pink one as well, and I think, as you've rightfully pointed out, you know, football has come a long way. Still, obviously, steps to be taken to eradicate, you know, homophobia, racism, sexism as well. But you know,
I mean, I can tell you from when I started watching in the '60s, you know, the N-word and that all that stuff was just completely endemic, and it was just accepted that, you know, I would never joined in, but it was, you know, it was something that was just accepted, that it was part of banter, you know, race, sexuality, whatever. It was just banter. And of course, there's still a few dinosaurs who think that now. You know, it just, I mean, hopefully, you know, it will die out as, frankly, as my generation dies out, because it tends to be the over 50s that are still, you know, sadly, the ones who are getting most who are most likely to be involved in this nonsense.
Yeah, it's an unfortunate side effect of. I hate that you said that word banter. People hiding behind that word is a
horrible word. Banter. You know, it's a completely bollocks word. You know, it's nonsense. It's an excuse for being an arsehole. Am I allowed to use words like arsehole and bollocks? Is that
yes.
Yeah.
I haven't used them already. You know, I mean, this is the man who once composed a satirical piece entitled "How to Say Penis on a Local Radio Station," which was then banned because I said penis. And this was a long time ago, but it was quite funny. Anyway, carry on.
Everything you mentioned there is exactly what we stand for on the podcast as well, and we reiterate it week in, week out. So thank you for doing our job for us this week.
Yeah, thank you. And also, just to say, people who say it's a joke or banter, they clearly just aren't very funny people if they need to joke about that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely.
Yeah, it shows a lack of decorum, lack of intelligence, and hopefully, as you say, you know, that will be eradicated soon. But that was actually my third question. What is your favorite shirt? And you answered that with the pink one, which is one of my favorites as well. I put that on Twitter. Someone asked about, what's our next away shirt going to be? And I put the pink one. And Ryan Adset was like, no, it's disgusting. I was like, what planet are you on?
Can I just point something out? I've only worn black since the late 80s, so I would never wear any of the shirts. The one shirt that I do wear, or I have worn occasionally, is the other one you've got there, the red and black one, because red and black, as you can see, are my colours, but mainly black. But yeah, there are others which I wouldn't wear, but I do think are quite funny, and that one was brilliant because obviously nobody obviously thought of the implications of it, like the people who, like the Germans, who thought the acronym SMEG would make a good sort of you know, a good trademark for white goods. I mean, you know, so you get your local SMEG distribution centre and all this sort of thing. And obviously, you know, I mean, well, say no more.
What an excellent tangent to go down, by the way.
Yeah.
Talking of wearing pink, didn't we have a goalkeeper kit that was pink once?
Yeah.
And the goalkeeper had to change at half time because the Sheffield Wednesday fans were giving him so much grief.
I remember I remember Kuipers wearing the pink shirt at Leeds. I'm certain. We may have all been wearing it. I remember Leeds and the pink shirt. Leeds was always the favourite place for giving back the homophobic abuse, especially because we over the years we've tended to beat them at Ellen Road more times than they've beaten us, which makes it especially fun.
Oh yeah, definitely. Nothing better than rubbing someone's face in it, figuratively, of course. So, John, you've alluded to your history as a Brighton fan, coming to the games and going to the games in the '60s. The three of us, myself, Kurtis, and Toby, we're '90s babies, as it were. So, you know, we discuss a lot of the things that happened in the '90s, most of which I was very young for, so I didn't get to experience, you know, firsthand properly. Now, the '90s, it's no secret to anyone, was especially the early '90s, were a very dark time in our club's history, and you were a huge part of the change for good, as it were. So I'd love to just get your views on that early part of the '90s where Archer and Belotti were destroying our club, and the fans were fighting to get them out and fighting for, you know, to keep their home, as it were. So I'd love to just, you know, get your thoughts on that. I'm sure you've told the stories millions of times before, but I just love to hear it from, you know, the horse's mouth, as it were.
Yeah, I mean, for me, football was always a hobby. It was my more than a hobby. It was my release. You know, there I am. I started in I was in punk bands in the '70s. 1980, I started as Attila The Stockbroker, charging around, doing loads of gigs, involved in all kinds of political stuff as well. I lived in a kind of, you know, basically a sort of a left-wing, ghetto-y kind of punk rock world. And football, specifically the Albion, but football generally, was the place in my life where I met people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, you know, all political views, and I loved that. It's just something, one of the things I loved about the game from when I started getting into it was that I met people at football that I would never have met anywhere else. And of course, when we realised what was happening, it was 1993 when I jumped up on the dugout and unilaterally declared the existence of Brighton Independent Supporters Association. And before that, I'd written there is a stench of decomposing flounder in the air in our club fanzine Gullseye, which had got us a lawsuit from John Campbell. We had to raise a load of money for that. And it was obvious in the 90s that things were going totally pear-shaped because of the long contracts of the players after the decline in the 80s, after the cup final and relegation and everything. And so we took them on. Everybody knows the story. There's no point in. But for me personally, yeah, it was a, you know, I had been and still am very involved in political activity, shall we say, in protests and all the rest of it. And the Albion was a kind of a release. But when I saw all the things that I loathed in society happening to the football club, the most natural thing in the world was for me to take my activism outside of the game into the game. And I made no bones about my politics, and I certainly didn't demand that everybody agreed with me. What we did was we said, you know, we don't care what your politics are. We don't care what your background is. We don't care how old you are. We don't care what sex, what gender you are, whatever. All we care about is that you support the Albion and you'll get involved to save the club. And that, you know, Beezer had no, you know, we didn't have a formal structure. I always said it was a narco-syndicalist collective. We didn't have a chairman or a minutes secretary. We didn't have members or subscriptions. We were just a group of people who met at the Concord. And this was right in the early days when we didn't have Dick Knight. It was just us against the board. You know, we met up at the Concord. We decided what we were going to do, and then we did it. And it just evolved from there. And I'll always say, as someone who's been involved in, you know, in all kinds, you know, from the miners' strike to the Wapping dispute to, you know, Rock Against Racism, all the stuff that I've been involved in through my whole life, that the campaign to save the Albion is the most successful, wide-ranging, all-encompassing grassroots campaign that I've ever been involved in. And people, you know, I actually wrote a song saying, you know, called Only Football, about people saying, well, it's only football. But the fact is that it isn't only football. It's about people coming together to save an edifice, a something, a creation, a fact of life in their lives that they love, that they are determined to keep. And they see it being ripped away bluntly, by the worst aspects of the economic system of capitalism. And that's the only way, you know. You don't have to be a lefty to when Bill Archer said to me, "I own this club, lock, stock, and barrel. There's nothing you half brains can do about it." Sorry about the imitation, northern accent, but you know, and that just summed it up. And he genuinely thought that because we were Southerners and we were Brighton fans, that he could wreck our club and that we wouldn't do anything. Because we were Southern softies or whatever, you know, and people in the North are the real football. Well, he found something. he found out. Yeah, when I was standing on his wall playing the fiddle, you know, with 200 of us marching through his village and all the rest of it, he found out the hard way, shall we say? You know, and I mean, one of the things that I say now is, I mean, I have retired. You know, I made it quite clear. I made it quite clear to the NSK when we got to Falmer that I was, you know, that I was stepping down, and then it was up to them if they wanted to take on the mantle of being, if you like, of the Beezer mantle. But they didn't want to, and that's fair enough. There's this new focus group, as I would call it, starting up now with elected fans on the board. Well done to Brighton and Hove Albion for having the initiative. For me, it's a bit like goal music, which we don't have. It's a bit like the manufactured, you know, fan zone thing beforehand. You know, I mean, you know, I am very old school in my attitude to fan collectivism, and I don't really think it can be manufactured in that way. But you know, a focus group is basically a good idea, and it shows that it shows that the board are absolutely trying to connect in a different way to the way, because I've still got, you know, I still have if I want, I can still say things and I'm listened to, but I don't really want to anymore. I've done that. You know, I'm so proud of where we are. I find modern football intensely irritating. I loathe the ridiculous amounts of money in the game. I loathe the ridiculous salaries and transfers fees in a world and a country where so many people are living in poverty. I loathe the ridiculous, you know, different times the matches are going to be. When it's not just for me as a performance poet musician who has gigs in the evenings and needs to know more than 6 weeks in advance when they're going to be, but for everybody who works and has a family. You know, it's just like, you know, obviously it's the television. You know, you know the score. But I'm really proud of where we came from, and I'm really proud of what we've done. And I will tell you, having been very involved in it, that this film, you know, which is coming up soon, Stand or Fall, all I can say is from what I've seen, from the questions that I was asked. I mean, I got to talk about existentialism, you know, and if I get to talk about existentialism in a film about football, you know, and playing Stockhausen over the PA with Dean, then that's good. That's good. Oh, that was great. So I think we can all look forward to it for all kinds of reasons.
Yeah, that film, I mean, the trailer looks fantastic, and I think, you know, the Brighton fans are rightfully very excited to see it. And Toby, you know, you've chatted very similar to Attila, what he just said about the existentialism and football and its future. You've chatted a lot about this on this podcast, haven't you, mate? And you've made your views, you know, very clear on.
I mean, we've gone round in circles over and over, and I could say everything that you've just said, John. I'm not going to repeat it, but as someone who is practically only grown up with modern football, as a youngster, I don't class myself as it. I feel old myself, but as a 24-year-old. I've only grown up with modern football, you know, practically since birth. We've been hearing more and more about record transfers every other season. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, it's ultimately led to, unfortunately, me and my granddad having to cancel our season tickets this year, because with the changing fixtures, we just can't make all the games. You know, 8 o'clock on a Boxing Day, that sort of thing. We just can't make all the games. That doesn't make us any less Brighton supporters, I'd like to say. But yeah, no, just just absolutely against the modernization of football. One thing I did want to ask as well, you know, all of your hard work to get Belotti and Archer out, like, just how satisfied is that feeling? Like, I can't imagine a feeling more satisfactory than just knowing that your hard work paid off to the absolute maximum, to where we are now, to Tony Bloom owning the club. Just how good is it?
Well, I mean, you know, obviously, have you heard my poem From Hereford to Here? I guess you must have done. I mean, obviously, and you've seen the documentary, the little one that they did in The Guardian.
Yeah, it's a thing of you,
nowhere,
mate.
from nowhere Premier League. I mean, you know, I mean, it is obviously when we started, I mean, the funny thing is, when I wrote Goldstone, I mean, I came back from the pub really quite pissed. A few days before the last game of the Goldstone, and I wrote Goldstone Ghosts in about 3/4 of an hour. And the second last verse, you know, the battle's only just begun, but we have won the war. Our club, though torn asunder, will survive. Because at that point, of course, we just know that Dick Knight was going to get a majority, where we would have a majority of the shares. And I salute each one of you who stood up and said no and fought to keep the Albion alive. And one day when our new home's built and we are storming back, a bunch of happy fans without a care will look back on our darkest hour and raise our glasses high and say with satisfaction, we were there. And I wrote that on about the 20th of April, 1997, when we knew that we had to win at least one of the last 2 games and other people had to lose to have any chance of staying in the Football League, and that we were not going to be playing at the Goldstone the following season. I knew that we would come back because I'd already seen around me so much passion, not just passion, but so much diversity and intelligence and different skills that people had to actually you know, I mean, to sum it up, you got me and Paul Samra, you got an accountant and a punk poet, sort of effectively being 2 of the main sort of spearhead of the Independent Supporters Association. And that just summed it up. There was every conceivable type of person there who could help, and so many different people with so many different talents and skills. And, you know, and this was, of course, before, more or less, it was, but yeah, at that point, it was before the internet as well. So imagine just how difficult it was compared to how it would have been now, because obviously later on, when we had the things like the campaign for the single in 2004, you know, it was kind of, well, I was thinking, this is easy. You just put stuff up on North Stand Chat, and people, and you know, spread it around on the internet, and then people go and buy the record, and it's just great. I mean, but yeah, I mean, it has been, and it remains, one of the most satisfying things that I've ever been involved in. I'm very proud of my involvement in it. I've tended now to, you know, it's not something that needs to be talked about all the time now. It's something that doesn't need to be talked about all the time, and it's something that should never be forgotten. I mean, I can talk the hind leg off a donkey, and I'm quite upfront, you know, and I'm sort of confident and all the rest of it. And I'm very much aware that I could talk about this forever. But I don't want to anymore. It's kind of, you know, we've moved on from that now, and rightly so. We should be where we are, but we are different, and we are different because of that. We're also different because of where we are, because of the part of the country we come from, which brings its own culture and its own traditions. And at this time, when, you know, when the political world is turning on its head, when Bolsover's, you know, Bolsover Council is Tory and Worthing's gone Labour, you know, it's kind of, it reflects a difference. It reflects a difference in, you know, in the way that things are developing. Not a bad difference or a good difference. Things are changing, and things should change. I mean, one of the problems I have with people of my generation is that so many people don't want things to change. They listen to the music they listened to 40 years ago. They want everything to be the same with the football that it was 40 years ago. They want, you know, they get more set in their ways and more right wing as they get older. And I'm thinking, what is all this about? I mean, you know, I mean, I'm still, I mean, I'm just listening to Radio 6 and Spotify and everything, trying to find really good new music. And to be honest, you know, having been there and done it and got the T-shirt, thinking to myself, yeah, that's not bad, but it still sounds like a sort of a fairly weak version of what we did 40 years ago. Occasionally, stuff like Bob Villan will come along, which is just absolutely bust through everything. I mean, people say, well, what about Idols? And I'm thinking, well, I mean, first off, they're not very young, and actually, you know, they're probably one of the most overrated bands in the world. Not bad, but you know, anyway, I'm digressing again. All I'm saying is that I'm really proud of what we did, but it's, you know, in the main now it's time to move on, but we must always have it in the background as something. It's where we came from. And the great thing about this film is I think the film will be kind of the 25th anniversary. It will be the summation of the whole thing, you know.
Yeah, definitely.
It will absolutely sum it up. So for people of your age, you will be able, if you, all the bits that you, because obviously I'm sure most Albion obsessed people will know about what happened, whatever age you are, whether you're 15 or 70, you're going to know about it. There's two sorts of people now. There's the people who just consume, you know, I mean, the people of my age who used to support Man U, you know, in their fake shirts. Oh, I've always been an Albion fan, you know, and obviously the people much, much younger who've just come into, oh, we're in the Premier League, you know, we're this, we're that, you know, who the people, I mean, you know, one of the things that I've always said was so fantastic about what we've done is that I live just off Southwick Green, and, you know, and in the 90s, all the kids there were wearing, you know, Liverpool, Man U, whatever tops, and AFC Southwick, the team which I've been trying to help recently, you may have heard about that as well. You know, all the players of AFC Southwick, who are all obviously, you know, about your age, they all support Man U or Liverpool or whatever, because when we were growing up, when they were growing up, we were absolutely rubbish, and you had to be a really dedicated character at primary school to say I'm a Brighton fan. I mean, I would have been, well, I was exactly one of those people, but then I've always liked to be different, and I've always stood up for myself. But if you're someone who just wants to be fit in, then, you know, so in general, I'm waffling, but in general, absolutely incredibly proud and conscious now that, you know, that it's time to, in the main, to shut up about it, because we've done it and it's part of the past. But when I'm invited onto something like this, or when I'm invited on to be part of that film or whatever, then of course I'll still talk about it, because, you know, you've got a whole new generation of people that haven't heard the story. And the fact that my generation can sometimes get a bit sick of hearing it doesn't mean that it shouldn't be told, because people your age need to hear it, you know, and people younger than you need to hear it. And, you know, it needs to be told over and over again. And then it needs to be handed down as part of our collective consciousness.
And
that's
what I agree. Yeah.
You know, that's the point. So it's not something, I mean, there is one of the things that I found a little bit sad in terms of the new direction of the board was that they were, for a time, in my view, trying to downplay it a bit too much. So the sort of upward mobility, a bit like Hyacinth Bucket, you know, here we are with our brand new togs on, and I know they probably maybe a bit of generational. A woman from a very much like my own personal background, people who are from very working class backgrounds trying to pretend that they're, you know, that they're posh. You know, same sort of thing. I was thinking to a degree a bit ago, but absolutely come back the right way now, acknowledging everything completely. And, you know, I think this is going to be a brilliant film. And I think it will literally be almost the closing of the chapter, the definitive statement that's never really been made. We've all done the little bits. We've all done there's been the documentary on The Guardian. There's been bits and pieces all over the place. But I think this will tie it all together. And then it will stand for the rest of time, as long as Putin and climate change doesn't destroy us all. It'll stand for the rest of time for future generations. Well, this is what happened to our club, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really nice way to put it. I think especially as a younger fan, I grew up in the 90s when the last game of the Goldson. I said it on the previous podcast. I remember the news coverage, and I knew
How
it
old
was.
were you then?
I'm 32, so in 97 I would have been 7 or 8.
Yeah.
And then I remember it being on the news, and I remember it being important, but I don't fully understand it. But it's funny you talk about shirts. I used to play for Haywards Heath Town, and I remember going to the training in 99, 2000 with my skint shirt on and getting laughed at by the other kids. And
Yeah.
As you say, they were all in their Manchester United shirts, their Arsenal shirts, or what have you. And there's me in my skint Brighton shirt, but proud as punch to wear
Absolutely.
it.
So you should be.
Yeah, definitely. So let's chat a bit. I want to just talk about really brief about those Priestfield years, because I suppose we talk a lot about, you know, the Goldstone, the Hereford game, and then sort of we've got these 2 years where Brighton were playing at home in Gillingham, and you were the stadium announcer and the DJ, as you've alluded to. What was it like for those 2 seasons, like to play home games in Gillingham, and having a 150-mile round trip ish?
Well, what happened was, it's a very funny story. What happened was, the first game at Gillingham, I was there with Dick Knight, and the Gillingham announcer was a guy called Ken Brown, I believe. He was a folk singer. He said, "Now welcome Brighton Hove Albion," and it was just the most soulless, you know. So I said, "Dick, we got to have something better than that." And you know, I could do. How about a friendly voice from home? I got gigs, but I can sort it out to be able to do the PA. And he said, "John, that's a brilliant idea." So he told the Gillingham announcer, who was overjoyed to not have to do it. And I was ensconced in the PA box with my records, obviously my punk rock. So there was immediately a Phil Collins band, punk, ska, and reggae, a little bit of Stockhausen, occasionally a bit of Welsh language hip hop now and again, or you know, that sort of thing. And the problem was, it was a nice problem. The problem was that I tended to get to the ground about 12:30, go to the Rose Neath, which was a purveyor of very fine ale in those days, have 4 or 5 pints, and then go to the ground to do the PA. Now, of course, there were 2 problems with that. Because I'm confident and experienced as a performer, I could certainly do the announcing and all the rest of it very well. But there was the problem that I would get a full bladder, and I could maybe not be there for the most important moments if I wasn't careful. So after a while, after a couple of moments where that happened, I asked my friend Paul Samra, my comrade in arms Paul Samra, to join me, and then that bit of history was made. And it was completely surreal, because obviously we were terrible, absolutely dreadful. The you know, where we were was, if Kent is the Garden of England, then Priestfield is then Gillingham's the compost heap, and the Priestfield Stadium is the outside toilet. And it was just horrendous. And of course, the reasons we were there, the whole thing. The first season, where the only team worse than us was Doncaster, who'd got a chairman that burnt down the stand. Remember Robinson? We chased him out of an away game at Doncaster Rovers. They were bottom of the league. They had a pub team. We were second bottom of the league. We had the Heart of Football, the second Fans United game. Obviously, the first one was at the Goldstone in that last season. The second one playing Donny. And it was on Valentine's Day, the Heart of Football, you know, a national loving for football in crisis. I think one of the many things we called it. So, and it was the worst game I've ever seen. It was, I mean, you know, I mean, Andy Ansar, oh, crikey, Michael Mahoney Johnson. I mean, the names, the memories, the ineptitude, the asininity. The people the hooves, the long ears, the carrots, the ears, and there was Doncaster Rovers with an enormous goalkeeper who's about 4 stone overweight, and it was just ridiculous. But the funniest story. Have you heard the Sex Pistols story? Have you heard about that?
I think I might have done, but retell it anyway, John. Go on.
Because it is really, really funny. So it was Colchester United away. Sorry, Colchester United at home. Hang on a minute. I'll read it. I'll read it from my autobiography.
Amazing.
It's the best way, because it is one of the funniest things that's ever happened to me. There's a whole chapter called Building a Bonfire. The last chapter in my autobiography is about the story of, you know, the battle to save the Albion. So this is me. It's Boxing Day, and we're at home to Colchester United, and the kickoff is at midday. The tunes I've been playing pre-match have been going down well with the Albion fans I talked to. And the whole idea of playing music that was as energetic as possible to try and create some sort of pre-match atmosphere in a home ground 70 miles away was a hit with Dick Knight and the club. It was an early kickoff on Boxing Day. We were bumping around second from bottom of the whole Football League, with a team perhaps even worse than the one we'd had the previous season. We'd obviously had to set off really early to get to Gillingham in time for the game after Christmas Day, and everyone was a bit bleary-eyed. So for the first time, I decided to play Anarchy in the UK by the Sex Pistols. It had been on for about a minute when a policeman burst into the box. "Take that off, now!" "Why?" I asked, but I could see that he was really angry, so I did, and I put the Clash on instead. "You can't play that record at a football match. It's banned, it's on the list." "What list?" I asked. "No one has ever told me there was a list of records I couldn't play." "Well, it's obvious, isn't it?" he shouted. "It's obvious." I stood there, the Clash playing in the background, perplexed. It evidently wasn't obvious to me. The fact that he needed to explain further made him even more angry. "It incites violence in the crowd." I thought for a few seconds. "Well, officer," I said, "I bought 2 copies of Anarchy in the UK in the black sleeve on EMI Records on the day that it came out in 1976 from the independent music shop in Canterbury High Street while I was at the University of Kent. I have played it and heard it many, many times since. Not once has doing so given me violent thoughts of any kind whatsoever. I've also been to all 92 Football League grounds. And every time I've heard In the Air Tonight by Phil Collins, I've had to restrain myself from committing serious acts of criminal damage." He didn't get the joke. And a couple of days later, Brighton Hove Albion Football Club received a formal letter from Kent Police banning me from doing the PA at Gillingham any longer. Dick Knight phoned me up. "I'm not having that, John." He spoke to them and the ban was rescinded on condition that I didn't play Anarchy in the UK again. So I didn't. I did play Smash It Up by the Damned and I Fought the Law and White Riot by the Clash in the next couple of weeks. No policemen appeared in the box. Obviously, those 3 weren't on the list. So there you go.
I love it.
Fantastic. It's so good.
One of the funniest things that's ever happened to me at a football match, because I had been to all 92 Football League grounds by that time, because obviously Brighton had been in all 4 divisions, and there have been many occasions when my work had taken me to places where I couldn't watch the Albion, because obviously gigs don't always fit around the fixture list. So I'd obviously gone to see the local team, one of them, wherever I'd been. And I did without even trying, without doing anything train spotter-esque at all. By that time, I'd been to all 92 league grounds, and I had heard In the Air Tonight an awful lot, and I really, it's probably my least favourite song ever in the world, ever. So there you go.
I actually wanted to ask you something, because you've sort of touched on your connection with punk music. How did you find yourself in what I refer to as the murky mire that is punk rock?
How did I find myself in it?
Yeah, how did that come into your life? How was that a factor for you?
It was the most natural thing in the world. I grew up, when I started writing little poems and songs when I was a little kid. My dad died when I was 10. And I grew up basically with a great love of words and strange words. And by the time I was 11 or 12, I was seriously into Tyrannosaurus Rex and T-Rex. But I was also really into sort of alternative music, just instinctively. And the Velvet Underground, Nico, the first Velvet's album, was the 3rd album I bought when I was 14 years old. And I don't know how much, I mean, I hope there isn't a generational sort of understanding problem when I talk about the Velvet Underground, because in my opinion, they are the most influential band in the entire history of rock music. And so, and I just happened to actually absolutely love them quite independently when they weren't well known at all. It's just something that happened, and it sounds pretentious or whatever, but believe you me, it wasn't. That's just what happened. And from that, I went into people like Mott the Hoople and MC5. And when punk happened, it was the most natural thing in the world for me. And I went to university when I was 17 in 1975. I was immediately involved in putting on gigs with the Entertainments Committee, and of course punk happened. So we literally put on the Jam before anyone had heard of them. We put the Stranglers on when they were still called the Guildford Stranglers. We put on, the Adverts when hardly anyone had heard of them. I mean, all the early bands we put on. And I just loved it. And I was a bass player. I taught myself to play the bass. I was a bass player, and then, obviously I was also writing poems and little songs. And then I realized that you couldn't actually be a punk bass player and be the front. It is actually impossible to sing and play the bass at the same time, unless you're Paul McCartney or that bloke from Level 42, or Tom Robinson. And so I got the mandolin, and I started jumping on stage between bands doing poems. And the main thing about punk rock for me wasn't it, I always said it's an attitude of mind, not the noise you make, because the main thing about punk rock for me was, you know, the idea that you were independent, that you no longer, because I grew up with the sort of the old hippie thing. You had to get signed, man. You had to get a deal. You know, you had to wait for people to come and discover you. And the whole idea of punk was you get out there, do it yourself, put out your own records, publish your own books. And because I've always been really confident, so I've huge self-belief, and I'm incredibly confident. It was the most natural thing in the world, and it's something I could do quite easily. So I did, and I love the music. Obviously, the Clash are my favourite band of all time. When I always say I saw the Clash in May 1977 at the Rainbow, and I knew exactly what I wanted to do with the rest of my life. And then tiny bit later, I saw John Cooper Clarke, the great punk poet, at a gig, and I knew how I wanted to do it, and that was that basically for me, and it has been ever since. And it's never, I've gone from then, you know, to now, literally earning my living doing what I love. And the only difference now is that I can't stay up all night and have 9 pints and do 10. I've got a 14. I've got a 16-date tour coming up in mainland Europe, the first one since COVID and Brexit bollocks. And I'm thinking to myself, I've really got to have a couple of days off now. I'm 64. I can't actually do this to sort of, you know. But, you know, so I'm having a couple of days off, but I'm going out there and, you know, and as I say, I mean, I love it. And yeah, punk for me, it's not a fashion. It wasn't. The people who say, oh, punk was something that happened in between 1977 and 1978. That's nonsense. I mean, what that is, if that's the same as the people who say to me, oh, I didn't know you were still going because I was on the front cover of Melody Maker in 1983 and I was on the telly quite a lot. And it's kind of, you know, what happened in that period was the mainstream media took an interest in it. It didn't mean it stopped when that mainstream media interest went away. It meant it turned into something else, something in many ways far more valid and far more important, because it was truly underground and was no longer, you know, infested with people, you know, what to wear with the sun. So what you wear if you're a punk rocker, you get, you know, and it's like, the whole idea of punk is you don't do what you're told, and you don't have the mainstream media telling you what you're supposed to be thinking. Anyway, yeah.
I mean, that's what I've always loved about punk, because punk's sort of permeated my life for as long as I can remember. I'm a big like Dead Kennedys fan.
So tell me, of your generation, who is your favourite band right now? Of your age?
Of my age currently. I only listen to stuff like Devo and Motorhead and things like that. Anyway,
right. You see, this is the point. So yeah. What you do is when you say that, you make it sort of gives me a bit of sort of, I feel pleased that, because the one thing I don't ever want to do is either be taken for or feel like somebody who's living in the past or whatever. But at the same time, I love music, and if our music really was better, then, and I think it was, frankly, but I'm not. I need other people of your age to tell me that you think it was too, so I don't feel like an idiot. I mean, I do think that Bob Vylan is the most exciting thing I've heard for years. So if you haven't heard Bob Vylan, it's punk grime 2-piece, unbelievable.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Two black guys doing punk grime. It's phenomenal, really political, really angry. You know that. I mean, the King Blues were brilliant as well. I don't know if you've heard of them. Sadly, Itch got himself up a bit of a gum tree for other reasons, but the music was brilliant. And there's been quite a lot over the years. I mean, you know, and there's some great stuff. I mean, people like Jess Silk now. I mean, who are, you know, younger than you. I mean, there's loads and loads of good sort of folky stuff and good sort of political poetry around. But yeah, anyway, carry on.
Yeah,
but sorry, Tom. Sorry.
No,
it's the music to me that can tell a story and just deliver a message. I mean, I remember one of the earliest things I ever heard was some Blockheads, Ian Dury and the Blockheads stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm a massive fan of their music. And I remember just hearing these stories that Ian Dury was telling, and just being so amazed by this. And then later on, listening to things like The Clash and listening to those messages that were being told to me, and I was like, yeah, this is really important stuff.
The whole point about punk, and the whole point about obviously I'm a poet. For me, you know, a song is, for me, it's 50%. I mean, obviously, some of what I do is unaccompanied. But if I'm using music, then a song is 50% the music and 50% the words. And to not bother about the lyrics and concentrate on the tune, to me, is complete nonsense. I mean, it's like yes, you know, the song, the structure of the song. If you're writing a conventional sort of, you know, tuneful song, then it needs to be really good. But whatever you're doing, the words matter, you know. And obviously they don't matter for quite a lot of people, which is why you do get some really good tunes where the words are just total bollocks. I mean, you know.
Yes, that's what happens when I turn on Radio 1 sometimes on my way
indeed.
to work.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought up music though, Kurtis, because I'm going to now ask you, John, about your Seagull ska. Now, I'm a massive ska head. I used to be in a ska band in the mid-noughties when third wave ska revival was like the cool thing. And Brighton.
So you used to hang around with people like Cap Down and Light Year and all that lot, yeah.
Cap Down was my first gig. Went to see them at the Concord too.
Right, cool, yeah.
Fantastic. But all those days with a Punker Bunker.
I did a gig with the singer at a Light Year in Cornwall a couple of weeks ago, actually.
Did you?
Yeah.
Did he still get naked?
Yeah, I mean that it was. Yeah, I mean I'm a huge ska fan too. I mean I've actually just finished a dub poetry album, something I never thought I would do, but I got a really good producer who again is your age, and he's actually the son of a friend of mine who's a brilliant reggae producer, just been working in Jamaica at the Big Fish studio with Liverpool Thompson and Freddie McGregor, and he just provided me some great dub tracks, and I've just done a dub poetry album. So yeah, I mean I'm a huge. So what happened with this with Seagull Ska? Obviously this was a time when we were trying. It was absolutely in the middle of the campaign for the new stadium, and we were trying to think of anything that we could that would get national media coverage. And basically, I was away at Ipswich. We were away at Ipswich, and I think we were winning, and they equalised, and they played Tom Hart. Now the Piranhas, I used to go and watch. They were the very first Brighton punk band that I saw, one of the very first that existed. I used to watch them at the Vault, which in itself is an amazing story, under the Presbyterian Church Hall in North Road, an actual literal burial vault. We used to have gigs with coffins and skeletons coming out of the wall, and I used a lead coffin as a cash box once, a little baby's lead coffin. I mean, surreal stuff. Anyway, so the Piranhas were playing there, and I used to follow them, and they had this hit with Tom Hart, which wasn't their song, it was an old Quailer song, in 1978. And it was taken up by sports people, and used for football. And I always found it irritating when it was played against us because it's a Brighton song. And I just had this idea. Suddenly, I thought, hang on a minute, I could rewrite the lyrics, and we could turn it into a Brighton a campaign song to get the new stadium. So I went to Bob Grover, who I knew very well, the singer of the Piranhas, who co-wrote it. Obviously, he wrote the words. He said, no. I said, do you want to do this, mate? Because the first thing to do is to find out, does he want to do it? And he didn't want to do it. He said, do you mind if I do it? He said, no, go ahead, be my guest. So then I got my band, Barnstormer, and mates of mine, Too Many Crooks, were well up for doing it. Too Many Crooks being a really good ska band. He likes ska. You probably heard Too Many Crooks already. They're really cookie, great bunch of lads as well. So then what happened was, of course, serendipitously at the time, Skint was our main sponsor. So I went to Midfield General, aka Damien Harris, who actually used to be the manager of a punk band called The Infested when I was at the University of Kent, that we used to put on as part of our Kent Rock Against Racism gigs. And I gave him the idea, and he thought it was absolutely brilliant. So we went in the studio and recorded it. And because I've got a very good mate called John Otway, who's already had auto-produced hits, with a fan base that would just go out on the right time to buy it. I knew the best time to release it would be straight after Christmas, when absolutely no other bugger was putting out records. So we did. And it was just at the time when the internet was beginning to get going. North Stand Chat was obviously going. So we basically told everybody what they needed to do. And I was quite proud of it. I mean, people had mixed views about it as a record, but the idea to get the publicity was fantastic. So we all bought it at the right time. We got to number 17 in the charts. And if they hadn't Skint ran out of copies, we'd have gone even higher the following week. But they sold out. They didn't think it was going to sell anywhere near as many. So they hadn't printed enough. So it sold out. And it was just amazing. I mean, obviously we got huge amounts of national media coverage everywhere. The most important thing was A, that it really raised the profile of the campaign, and B, it raised about $2,000 at a time when we had no money at all. It raised about $2,000 to keep the club going as well, So Yeah, it was brilliant. I mean, and I mean, to this day, Roll Up for the Donkey Derby, the B-side. That's the one that I'd written that earlier. Actually, I wrote that in 1990 when Palace got to Wembley. But obviously, we did a remix of it, and it was great. I mean, some people liked it, some people didn't, but it was a great adventure, really good fun, and it did, as with everything that we did at that time. You did it. The main aim was it's got to get us as much publicity as possible, and it has got to go some way towards achieving our aim, and it's got to be fun, because it's got to be fun. The whole point about me of campaigning, all the stuff I've been involved in my life, is not only are we trying to do something important, but we need to have fun, and at the very least get satisfaction from it while we're doing it. And it was incredibly good fun to do that. It was just such a laugh. And Busted split up on the day that we got in the charts. And a band like Busted doesn't split up. A band like Busted are artificially deconstructed in the same way they're constructed by their management and the corporate music industry. They are deconstructed at a particular moment in order to maximize profits and all the rest of it. So of course, the entire Top of the Pops that week was cancelled, and it was just a feature about Busted and the fact they'd split up. Otherwise, some of the oldest, ugliest old punks and skinheads in Brighton would have been on Top of the Pops that weekend. But
I would have loved.
Would have been bloody wonderful.
Would have been bloody wonderful. Again, I was chatting to Aaron, John, one of our other hosts on Albion Obsessed, and we were talking about the year it came out, and neither of us could believe it was 2004. Because it's one of those things that it seems like forever ago and only yesterday, all at the same time.
So you would have been about 14 then or something. Yeah.
I would have been 14, so I was going through my ska phase then.
Like
the 80s two-tone stuff, the specials, whatnot, and then
absolutely.
So for me, hearing a ska song on the radio as well, I was like, this is the kind of music I like, because at the time
it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't bad. It was proper ska people playing it. The ska version of Sussex by the Sea, we had what's his name, famous actor, God crikey, bloke from Withnail and I playing on it, and his sax sounded like a kazoo. But apart from that, there were funny enough, although there weren't enough copies for it to end up going higher in the charts, there were enough copies for me to end up with about 50 of them here, and they've gone over the years. So I've still got 3 left now. Yeah, it was one of the many things that we did. It was just fun, and it really achieved something. We got in the bloody Daily Telegraph and everything like that, And I refused to talk to the Daily Mail or the Sun, so someone else did that. Norman Cook or somebody. But yeah, I interview in the Guardian and the Independent and everywhere, and it was talking about the campaign, and it was brilliant. It was really brilliant. It was great.
Yeah, it seemed fun, and as being a kid, I just remember it sounding fun. So that's
it was fantastic.
Yeah. So whizzing ahead now a few years to more the Amex era, especially with our Premier League status.
Can I just say that as I was saying, from Hereford to here, a lovely Falmer Stadium. The board will not agree. I've never had a credit card. It's still Falmer to me. And when I did my poem from Hereford to here, which you probably saw because it was the precursor to the very first game against Man City, those 4 lines were censored from the production. So that's why that poem didn't scan properly, because 4 lines were taken out. So yes, I've had my run-ins with Barber and Co over the years, but it's fine. I mean, I understand where they're coming from. They've got a sponsorship to all the rest of it, and I mean, I call it Falmer. I mean, I thought Falmer. I use the A word occasionally, but mostly I call it Falmer. But anyway, carry on.
So I'm just actually literally about to talk to you about that BT thing, because I think that was one of the most beautiful, poignant poems of the time. Because I think, as you say, John, like, it's one of those things that we should never forget, that has been spoken about a lot. But it was such a nice way to start our Premier League era, if you like, having that poem on. So did you write that poem specifically for that, or was that something you've been working on before? And how did it go about getting it on BT? Did they approach you?
Yeah, they approached me. I'd written it. I had written it already. I thought that there might be some sort of interest, so I wrote it. I put it out on my. It's grown even more since then. I've always, Facebook has been my. I'm a writer. I've written for many national newspapers, mostly been sacked from them because I won't toe the bloody party line. I write a lot now, and I use my Facebook. Facebook is my main outlet, and I've got many tens of thousands of followers on there. So I thought when I put it out on there, it might sort of get picked up, and it did. And that's how it came about, basically. And then I just expanded it a bit, and I was very proud of it being out before the first game. And I'm glad it was BT, because at the time I had an absolute loathing of Sky. I've suspended my loathing of Sky now, in the sense that Murdoch no longer owns it, and Sky Arts is actually, there's some really good stuff on it sometimes, some very good stuff indeed. And of course it's on Freeview. So, but at that time I was boycotting Sky. I still wouldn't have a subscription to satellite television like that. I'm too busy anyway. But it was. I'm very proud of of having done that, and very proud that it was used.
Yeah, it really is a thing of beauty. But now you've got me intrigued. What were the missing lines, if I could be so bold as to?
Well, I've already read them to you. I said. It was our lovely Falmouth Stadium. The board may not agree. I've never had a credit card. It's still Falmouth to me. Those were the 4 lines that fitted in the scansion of the poem, and they removed. I performed them, and then I had a call from Paul Camelin, who's head of media, who I've known. He used to be one of our right-hand people in the war years. He was out there with the best of them when it came to taking on Archibald and Stanley. And he said, and he said, we can't use that. And I said, well, of course I understand that. You've got your sponsors and all the rest of it. I'm going to say it, and I'm going to use it, obviously, when it's not being broadcast on something like that. But I accept that. It wasn't like, it was just bloody predictable. But I thought it might get through, but it didn't. So there you go. But yeah, I was very pleased and happy to do it, to use it. It was great.
Fantastic. That's brilliant, John. Just really quickly before, because we're getting to the hour mark now, so I just wanted to ask you about what you felt about this season. So again, just whizzing forward a little bit, how have you felt like Brighton's season has gone this year? Because it looks like we're on course to finish in the top 10 in the first division, in the top division of English football. So as your history as a Brighton fan, you've seen us at our lowest, and you've now, I think this is our highest position we've ever finished in the top division. So how would you summarize this season as a whole?
Well, my summary is quite simple. This is by far the best period ever in our history. Potter is literally 3 times as good as any other manager we've ever had in our entire history. I think he's a tactical genius. I think the football we're playing at the moment is the most beautiful I've ever seen. I come back and watch Match of the Day, whatever, with my wife, and came with me to Gillingham and with Dean. She's even less fond of modern football than I am. She doesn't, so she doesn't come to games anymore, but she still shares the happiness, on watching it on Match of the Day or whatever. We're playing the most beautiful football, just 1 striker away from a top 6 club. And I think Potter is a genius, as I say. And this has been the best season we've had ever in my life, from every perspective. If it hadn't been for that little dip, I think we might well have got into Europe. And in my opinion, the little dip was entirely caused by the hirelings of a murderous, disgusting, murderous, fascist, misogynistic, homophobic state, literally bribing Dan Ashworth to leave the club after there was some sort of a belief between him and Barber and Potter that they would be working together for the future. And then these people came in and literally just threw so much money at him that, even though, I don't understand this. You only need so much money. They're all already incredibly well paid. Why? Well, okay, because it's a big club and all the rest of it, and they've got a big fan base. But you know, one thing I will say to you is, and I mean this, I love the Albion, and I've been through them with everything. But if something like that ever took the club over, I wouldn't watch them. I would never stop supporting them, but I would not. While something like that owned it, I wouldn't go and watch them. And I would do everything I could. However, I don't think I'm certain it won't ever happen, because Bloom is a proper fan and blah blah blah. But I mean, I would do everything I could just to say to people, we should not. I would rather be less successful than have this. You know, it's like, but you know, okay, that's me. That's modern football, whatever. But I do. All I was saying was that, or about that, was that I believe that the dip, that period where we lost 6 in a row, was actually down to a certain level of confusion and disappointment and disarray for a short period of time, which I think has been alluded to obliquely by Potter in some by Barber in some of his notes, that they were really shocked by it. I mean, I saw actually a report in one of the national newspapers that they were actually seriously shocked. They didn't believe it would happen. But apart from that, which was not of our doing, that was Dan Ashworth's decision. I hope he's enjoying his bloody gardening. I hope there's lots of bindweed in his garden, and Japanese knotweed, and all the things that we don't like here in Southwick in ours. Anyway, so apart from that, it's been absolutely brilliant, and the football we're playing is fantastic. And we were just a couple of games away from. Before I die, I would love. I've done. I mean, I'm off for my next year. I mean, I've done about 600 gigs, more than that probably in mainland Europe. I speak French and German. I'm a linguist. I would love to see the Albion play in mainland Europe before I die. That's probably my last Albion related sort of. I mean, you know, there's this funny thing about it, isn't there? You know, I've watched this club all my life, and now realistically, the best I can hope for is that we might finish 7th in the Premier League or whatever, you know. And that kind of glass ceiling, that's what is really wrong with modern football. The procession, okay, but Leicester. Yes, I know, but Leicester. I don't think but Leicester is ever going to happen again. And I do think that it's going to eat itself. I think modern football will eat itself. I think the bottom will fall out at some point. I'm not quite sure how, but I think it will. But yeah, the best season in our history, the best team in our history, the best manager in our history, and so fittingly, poetically, 25 years on, as it was fitting and poetic that 20 years on, from being at the very worst of times, literally almost to the day of the Hereford game, that we got in the Premier League for the first time.
This club do like to do things like that, don't they? Poetic, you say. So just before we sign off, John, I'd love to just push you for one more thing, and that's just your highlight as an Albion supporter across your lifetime. So
absolutely, no doubt at all. The final whistle at Hereford. You know, forget the Premier League, forget getting to the Cup final, forget, you know, beating Sheffield Wednesday at Arsenal in 1983 and having a gig straight afterwards and literally not remembering what I performed or anything. And I did an interview with a fanzine run by a very good friend of mine who I still know now, and I can't remember what I said. But all that, and all the promotions, and you know, and everything, you know, everything without any doubt at all. The final whistle of the game, which stopped us going out of the Football League, knowing that we didn't have a ground the following season, is my top moment in my life as an Albion fan. Hard
to argue with that at all. Thank you so much for giving up some time of your evening to come and chat to us. It's been a roller coaster. I feel like I've learned so much about yourself, about Brighton as the club, and punk rock as well. Which is
thank you for running a really interesting, intelligent podcast, which I've never listened to before, but I will certainly do now, and for inviting me onto it and giving me the opportunity to spend time with people a bit younger than my friend Alan Adey at the Albion Raw, who I'll be probably doing one for next week. So well done for taking this into the new generation and everything. Obviously, I mean, I follow what's going on, what people are doing, but I've never been actually involved in one of these before. So thanks for inviting me, and yeah, it's really, really good.
Well, but I just want to say, and I'm sure all of us will echo this, just thank you for what you've done for our club. Ultimately.
Cheers. I did it because I believed, you know, and I've always stood up for what I believe is right all my life, and all these little victories, whether it be, you know, it's a big victory, you know, I mean, last year when my wife became the first ever Labour councillor in Southwick Green, or you know, or many other things. But of all the different things that I've done, I think the thing I'm most proud of as a political activist is saving the Albion, because I know of the legacy. I know what it means to people, and I know, quite apart from the football aspect, there's so many people I know who really did think that ordinary people could not achieve anything. And when they were involved in that and they saw that they could, it took their lives on a new trajectory, and that was really important to me.
Fantastic, and I think that's a perfect place to finish. Thank you so much, John. Thank you, Toby. Thank you, Kurtis, for joining me this evening. Thank you, listeners. Please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe. And if after this you fancy it, go listen to some punk rock and kick up a fuss somewhere. Take it easy, guys. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.